So my goal, my mission is to educate us all to be healthier, and for you all to come with me on the journey, and for you guys to teach me, and for me to teach you. So if you have an interest in something that I'm not tapping into, please let me know. If you like something and you want more of it, let me know that as well. And if you know of somebody that's a resource for, presenting or writing, please let me know that too. So today's event, this is interesting. So this is Randi Epstein behind me. So I don't know if any of y'all know Gretchen Rubin. She wrote the Happiness Project, and so I get a lot of her things. She's very prolific on email and whatever. So, but she does do this one thing that I really love, and she interviews people, and she has like 8 or 7 standard questions. So she interviewed Randi a few months ago, and I got it in my email from Gretchen Rubin, obviously, and I loved Randi's responses, and I'm like, I think I could be friends with her. Like, she seems really cool. And she lives in New York City, and in the post, Gretchen mentions that she had this book coming out. So I was like, okay, that's really even, better. So I started following Randi on Instagram. We've connected, hence we're here today. So we share other commonalities. She has a freshman at the same college that my son is at today. So it's just, and she's a physician, it's just all weird. Like, all the connections is just really it's interesting and fun. So let me tell you a little bit about Randi. So her background's quite impressive. She went to University of Pennsylvania undergrad and got a degree in history and sociology of science. Then she got an MD degree at Yale. She has a master's in public health at Columbia and a master's in journalism at Columbia. She currently teaches at Yale undergrads English writing, medical writing. So she wrote this, she's written 2 books. AROUSED, which is what we're going to talk more about today, is her second book. Her first book was Get Me Out, The History of Childbirth. And so I don't know if any of you have had the chance of reading any of her writing or her book. I've been reading it, and so I find it really fascinating. Like yesterday I was reading the chapter on short stature, being tiny like me, whatever. But it's really interesting. Like, we take for granted what we know today in 2018. We know a lot, but there's still a lot that we don't know. But Randi takes us back in her book to like the inception of all the scientists and kind of their exploration and how they interacted with patients for the first time. And so this one particular chapter in the short stature, it's this one, she focuses on a family or a patient often in each chapter. And this one chapter is about a little boy. I think he was like 7, and then he was 8. And every time he went to the pediatrician's office, the pediatrician, brought to the attention of the parents, like, he's kind of short. You should maybe take him to see a height specialist. And they kept saying, oh, no. And finally they did. And ultimately he ended up on human growth hormone. However, she goes through the arduous process of acquiring that human growth hormone, where you have to actually get it from a dead person, a pituitary gland. And one pituitary gland's acquisition of that growth hormone was 1 dose for this patient. And that's 1 dose per day, and he really ideally, I guess, should have been on a dose every day, but he was on it for like 3 times a week. So they needed like 100 cadavers. And so that was like the inception of the whole kind of, this whole process. It just was really interesting. They got like a group together, and I think they're still involved, right, this family? So I'm butchering this, so I'm gonna let Randi do this. So today, if you guys could keep your personal questions kind of to a minimum, she's gonna share a lot with us today, and I think we're in for a treat. So enjoy.
Great, thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here, and it's just amazing what you all have with soul food. I have to say, I kind of feel like I'm feeling the love in the room, that like even if I weren't here, just have all these smart women together talking to each other. Like I feel like I'm an accessory, so that way you can all just meet each other after. But yeah, this is amazing, Jeannie, that you pull this all together, and it's fabulous. And I'm thrilled, and I hope to meet a lot of you after, because I'm just impressed so much with the people I've met so far. So what I want to do is I'm just going to talk about a few stories from my book, and feel free to yell out questions during the presentation. But I want to start with a little quiz. Do people have scrap paper or pen, or I do? If you don't, here. You can even just take, and there's a prize. So just rip off half. There's prizes. So this is what we're going to do. It's probably not fair because there's a few doctors here. Yeah, just rip it in half. All you're going to need to do is write down A, B, or C 3 times. It's 3 multiple choice questions. So here, just like you just need a little scrap paper. And it's going to be honor system. So what we're going to do is it's 3 questions. You have a choice of A, B, or C for each one. After the 3 questions, I'm going to ask, did anyone get them all right? If there's one person, you get the prize, and then if someone, then the next level, we have 2 prizes. If a lot of people gotten them all right, we're going to put your names in this cup, and then someone's going to draw names, and 2 of you are going to walk away with a huge, huge gift. Okay. Question 1, and just write down A, B, or C to the answer. And I'm not going to collect them, honor code. The only other mammal to experience menopause other than human females is A, dog, B, killer whale, C, squirrel. I'll repeat that. Only other mammal other than human females to experience menopause. A, dog, B, killer whale, C, squirrel. Question 2. In 1873, Lydia Pinkham developed the first popular nostrum for symptoms of menstruation and menopause. The active ingredient was A, estrogen derived from horse urine, B, alcohol, C, non-hormone anti-anxiety compound. Do that again. The 1873 menopause, menstruation, everything woman ailment cure was A, estrogen from horse urine, B, alcohol, C, non-hormone anti-anxiety compound. And the final question. We have OBGYNs in the audience, and they're going to know this one. But the reason why hormone replacement therapy contains progesterone and estrogen for women who have not had a hysterectomy or for women who have a womb, which I always think is a weird way of putting it, is A, because estrogen alone causes weight gain, B, because estrogen alone increases the risk of uterine cancer, or C, because progesterone is a mood enhancer. So the reason why, if you haven't had a hysterectomy, the reason why if you have a uterus, you're going to be estrogen and progesterone, not just estrogen alone, is because estrogen alone causes weight gain. That's A. B, because estrogen alone increases the risk of uterine cancer. Or C, progesterone is a mood enhancer. Okay, ready for the answers? 1, only other mammal to experience menopause. Anyone want to yell out what they thought? Killer whale. Because those of us who have gone through menopause are like, oh, that's what I felt like. You didn't feel like a squirrel, and you didn't feel like a dog. You felt like a killer whale. Yes. So that's B. The key ingredient in Lydia Pinkham's really super popular nostrum was, anyone want to yell it out? Alcohol. She basically sold gin in a bottle, but with a very medicinal kind of label on it. I would say it probably did do the trick. And 3, why is there progesterone with estrogen and hormone replacement therapy? Yeah, because estrogen alone increases the risk of uterine cancer. So who got them all? I knew this was going to happen. Okay, if you got them all right, put your name. Oh, you have to put your name on it. Just put your name on a piece of paper. And then pass the cup, or I'll just do this. Okay. We have 2 prizes. This is impressive. This is impressive. Who else got them all right? Jeannie, pick a name. Okay, you got them all right? No, but you can't win. You can't win. Okay, yeah. We're going to pick 2, but pick 1. Yes, that's it. Claire? Yes, congratulations. So, what we have for you, thanks to Lydia Pinkham, this is sort of a Lydia Pinkham, Jeannie Rosner kind of thing. I tend to give alcohol as a prize for the quiz, but because it's soul food, this is a really healthy coconut water with vodka. It'll do the trick. So no sugar added, pure coconut water, pure vodka. Let's pass that down. Congratulations, yes. Okay, one more. And M. Congratulations. And for you, this I actually do believe helps. This is my favorite, Hendrick's gin. And this is actually, honestly, I think this was Lydia Pinkham's cure. It looked like it was gin, but it had like a much fancier label. So enjoy. Isn't it nice? Okay, so what I want to do is I want to start my hormone talk, beginning with a story about my grandma. So when I was a kid in the 1960s, and I lived in Yonkers, which is a suburb above Manhattan, and my sisters and I, and my brother too, we'd spend a lot of weekends in the summer going to my grandma's pool club in Yonkers. My grandma and her 4 friends would sit in the shade, smoke Kents, and play canasta. And my sister and I did what women in the 60s or girls in the 60s did. We would take aluminum foil and put it around an album cover and put your chin in there. And then just to make sure you got all those wonderful cancer-causing rays, we would just douse ourselves in baby oil. But me, by the end of the day, I was burnt to a crisp, and then I'd just go back to pale the next day. And my sister would get like a decent kind of tan. But here's the thing. Grandma Martha, despite being under the shade, hidden from the sun, had the most gorgeous copper color. We were mystified, and we were a bit envious. It wasn't until years later that we learned that Grandma had a hormone ailment. She had Addison's disease. That's the hormone. Her body didn't produce enough cortisol. That's the hormone that helps maintain a healthy blood pressure. It's good for the immune system. If you've heard about it, we also think of it as the stress hormone. But people with Addison suffer from extreme fatigue, nausea, and low blood pressure. When I was a kid, I didn't know much about her disease, except that John F. Kennedy had the same thing, which made it sound like such a presidential thing to catch. My only memory of it was my mom saying to my grandma, "Ma, don't forget to take your cortisone pill." There was one in the morning and one in the afternoon. Not even sure I thought that like Addison's was a hormone ailment, because to me, hormones were boobs and your period and sex. But hormones, as we all know, are so much more. They're potent chemicals that control metabolism, behavior, sleep, mood, and the immune system. When I delved into the history of hormones, I did it because this past century has been one of amazing advances, but also outrageous claims. So consider this, it's pretty remarkable. When Grandma was born in 1900, the word hormone didn't exist. By the time she was diagnosed in the 1970s, you could spot her hormone defect and measure it down to the billionth of a gram. So I'm not a math person. My husband's not a doctor. He's a hypochondriac. But he does know math. And like during the whole process of my research, I would provide him with unsolicited, wonderful tidbits of my research. So much so that there were times, honestly, when I'd have to say, like at night, I'd be like, on the weekends, we may want to go to the movies, because if we just go for dinner, I think I'm just going to have to talk about like my book the whole time. I'm just a little obsessed. We saw a lot of movies. But one of the things I said was, you can measure hormones down to the billionth of a gram. And he was like, I don't think so. I don't think you get what a billionth is, maybe a millionth. No, I was right. That's why I love to tell this story. I was right. I'll repeat that. It is down to a billionth of a gram with a B, which is like a teardrop in the ocean. I am going to tell you about the woman who helped devise that technique. Like my grandma, she was from New York City. Like my grandma, she had 3 kids that she doted on and made home-cooked meals. Unlike Grandma, she revolutionized 20th century medicine and got a Nobel Prize. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So, Jeannie was talking about, we say like hormone as if it's this vague notion. But we have to appreciate a few things. That up until the 1900s, we knew that there were these secretions that did stuff, but the adrenal people didn't really talk to the pituitary people, didn't really talk to the testes people. And so there wasn't this main concept because we didn't really have a definition. We didn't really understand what hormones were. And if you had said to these guys, no, you're going to be one field, it would have been like saying neurosurgeons and dentists. No, you're going to be one field. There was no reason to think that someone that was trying to figure out what the pancreas did would have anything to do with someone doing testes stuff. So there's no prize for this, but does anyone want to shout out a definition of what they think hormone is? The definition of the word hormone? A trigger, yeah. Usually we get it through a few people getting anything else? Chemical messenger, yeah. So the definition is, and what we realized in 1905, is a potent tiny chemical messenger that's secreted from one gland and hits a faraway target. Not far away like LA to, San Francisco kind of thing, but far away like pituitary to ovary. And now, because that's why I think of your hormones as your internal Wi-Fi, and I don't even really understand what Wi-Fi is, except that I need routers in my house. And if you think about it, we'll write an email and you just assume it's going to go to the person without everyone else looking at it on the way. But in the ideal situation, you have an email, it goes to the person it's supposed to go to. Hormones, in a way, are these chemicals that know. It's like if you know someone with diabetes, they can take a shot of insulin and it's going to go where it goes. You don't have to get the insulin right into the pancreas. So when the doctors in the early 1900s came up with this concept, it was really controversial because the thinking was everything in the body had to travel along nerves. Or, yes, we knew that things like oxygen goes through blood vessels, but oxygen goes through blood vessels like going in a raft, and it's just needed wherever it bangs into. It's not this specific target. So it was fairly controversial. Of course, there were people that didn't believe it. But then, yes, it did catch on. And now, and I just want to talk about them. Why is my book called Aroused if hormones do all these other things? People are like, well, it's a little misleading, but it does jump off the shelf. And I do write about libido in the book, so there is some of that, but it's not a whole libido book. Women my age think it's a whole menopause book. There is that, and we'll talk about that. It's not a whole menopause book. The reason why it's called Aroused is let's go back to why are hormones called hormones. When these doctors in 1905 came up with this concept, they needed a name for it. Before it was just called internal secretions because we knew glands secreted stuff. But they said, no, but these secretions excite, they arouse. So they said, we need something, as doctors do, we need something Greek and highfalutin. So they went to their friend who was a Cambridge University professor, not a physician, a professor, and said, what's a word in Greek that means to arouse? And he's as in arousing the adrenal gland, arousing the pituitary. So he said, what about something along the lines of hormoa? So these guys, Starling and Ballas, they go back and they give a talk at the Royal Society of Medicine, and they said something like hormones, as we may call them. And it stuck, but of course there's doctors in the audience, and one doctor said, well, I don't know if I like that name. How about autocoid, which is kind of cool. It means internal drug. But then we'd have to be saying, oh my God, I feel so autocoidal, which sounds weird. So maybe they were thinking, no, we want women to say hormonal. So hormones stuck, and that became the name. And then when I needed a name of my book, there were some Boehringer names before this. I emailed a friend of mine who's really good at titles. She came up with Carmel Sutra for Ben & Jerry's and now has unlimited coupons for the rest of her life. So I emailed her and I said, my publisher doesn't like the names of my book. I need a new name. And she said, well, what does hormone come from? So I said, it means to arouse. And she's like, well, there's your title. And then, of course, a few months later, we were together, and I was telling someone how I came up with the title. And she's like, no, I think I did. And I'm like, no, I thought I did. She's like, no, I have the email chain. I'll forward it back to you. So she actually came up with the name. But, yeah, so it's It's how you think of aroused. You can be aroused when you wake up in the morning. And now, okay, I want to show a little video. And I want you to appreciate two things. One is, this is a video of the world's first hormone experiment. Because like everything in history, things always start before we think the start is. Someone had the idea and it was ignored. But a few points of this. One is that we always think that the best scientists are the ones that can answer the questions correctly, which in some ways it's true, but the best scientists ask the right questions. They know what to ask. You know, it's like, why did they research that and make the leap? I don't know. That's what made them great. And the other thing that great scientists do, they publish their findings in medical journals, which this guy did. And they also understand the ramifications and then really change paths, which this guy didn't do. The most important thing to understand about this video is this was done by two of my undergrads who are pre-meds. They're not filmmakers. Please take that into consideration. But they did a video project for my class, and I thought they did such a good job. I'm like, can you read my book and do a few videos for my book? So the other two are on my website. But so enjoy this. I think they did a phenomenal job. I've now watched it so many times.
Welcome to Highlights from Hormone History,
This will be 3
a video series inspired by Randi Epstein's book, Aroused.
I guess you can't see.
The subject of this video is the world's first hormone experiment. Learn about it in under 3 minutes.
In 1848, Dr. Arnold Berthold conducted the first genuinely scientific hormone experiment on 6 roosters in his backyard in Germany. Many scientists then were curious about the testicles, whether they contained vital juices, and how they worked. Could a testicle do its job if it were placed somewhere else in the body? Berthold cut a single testicle off of 2 of the roosters. He cut both testicles off another 2. In the remaining 2, he did an odd testicle swapping thing, removing both testicles and reinserting one in the belly of the other rooster. Each ended up with another bird's testicle, in the wrong place. Here's what Berthold found. The testicle-free birds got fat, lazy, and cowardly. Their brilliant red combs faded and shrank. They stopped chasing female poultry. His unitesticled roosters were the males, or rather the cocks, they had always been. They waddled, puffed their chests, and lusted after the hens. On autopsy, he found the lone testicle swollen. He reckoned it had swelled to compensate for the missing one. But the most stunning finding of all, the discovery that should have shocked the testicle research world, was the result of the gonad switching. Berthold had wondered whether testicles could function from anywhere in the body. They did. He had implanted a testicle between the intestinal loops of a fat, lazy, castrated bird. The young rooster, only 3 months old, had nothing between his drumsticks but a lone testicle in his gut. Yet he turned back into a full-fledged hen chaser, red comb and all. Berthold repeated his testicle-to-belly switch with another bird, and the same thing happened. Berthold had assumed that when he carved his poultry, he would find a network of nerves connecting the displaced testicles to the body. Instead, he found the testicles were surrounded by blood vessels. He wrote up the first explanation of how hormones work, writing that his experiment showed that the testes released a substance into the blood that was carried off to the rest of the body and reached a special destination. He was right. Hormones are released in one part of the body and reach a specific target like a well-aimed arrow from a bow. He didn't use the word hormone because it wouldn't be coined for another half-century. No one listened. The specialty of hormonal science could have started right then and there, but it didn't. Berthold's backyard rooster trial could have been the paradigm-changing experiment, transforming the way scientists looked at internal secretions. He published his insights. Then, without fanfare, he moved on to other projects. As Albert Q. Maisel wrote in The Hormone Quest, it was as if Columbus had discovered America and then went home to spend the rest of his life studying the streets of Madrid.
Thanks for watching.
There I go. Okay. So this is oxytocin. And some people are now promoting it as the love drug or the cuddle hormone. I don't know, like when you put it out like this, it doesn't look like love. But like so many things in medicine that's being sold to people, that it all does start with some grain of truth. So what do we know about this chemical oxytocin? Here's what we really know. Oxytocin is the hormone that squeezes the uterus and gets the baby out. So if any of you got that extra shot of Pitocin, you were just getting a shot of oxytocin to get the baby out. All fine. It's also the hormone that gets your breast milk flowing. That's fine too. Then I started seeing like, wow, you can go on Amazon.com and for only $48, you can buy a bottle of Oxytocin Spray that supposedly, makes people bond with you. There's actually a professor at Claremont McKenna who goes around saying, oh my God, that is nonsense. Buy mine, it's $5 a bottle. So I heard about all this stuff that really, it's one of these things that actually, and you can laugh about it, which I do, but then when you sit and think about it, or you meet some of these doctors that are peddling some of this stuff and making a ton of money, their patients, then it gets infuriating because people believe it. And we don't know what they're getting or what's in these bottles. So when I went to work on this piece, and I spoke to some amazing oxytocin researchers that are doing great stuff, I also wanted to find someone who was doing wacky stuff with oxytocin, because that makes for a really good story. My husband was going to LA on a business trip, and I said, I'm going to go with you because I'm going to find my oxytocin person there. And he said, you're so judgmental. Like, you don't even know LA. You barely go. Why do you think you're going to find like this crazy hormone clinic in LA? And I said, because I will. I just know it. And then he said, because he does know LA a lot. He's like, I don't think you realize how big LA is. Like, we could get there and this person could be like an hour and a half away. So, because I tend to just think of, from sort of Sacramento south as like one little neighborhood. So the fascinating, most amazing part of the story is, yes, I did find my clinic, and I'm going to read this to you in a second. But it was across the street from our hotel. It was just like the gods of women being right were just over me. That made me happier than anything. Like, I actually didn't care anything else. So I won that argument. Nothing made me happier during the whole book process. So I just want to read to you a little bit about this LA clinic. Dr. Prudence Hall gave oxytocin, a hormone, to her son before he hung out with his friends at a college bar. All the girls flirted with him, supposedly seduced by the powers of the endocrine aura. Another time, her daughter took oxytocin before a graduate school exam and said she was more relaxed and focused than she would have been without the drug. Hall, who is a medical director of the Hall Center, a health clinic on Wilshire Boulevard in Santa Monica, California, sells oxytocin to her patients who get social jitters before parties, who have lost their sex drive, or who just don't feel like their old, friendly, loving, trusting selves anymore. She shared her oxytocin candy with her publicist, her assistant, and me before we sat down to talk. It looked like opaque white pebbles, but tasted like sugar cubes. We slipped them under our tongues for the optimal rush. That method, she explains, drives the drug to the brain quicker than oxytocin nasal sprays you can buy online. Dr. Hall is trained as an obstetrician gynecologist, but in her new broader role, she takes care of men too. She has flowing blonde hair and a soothing way of speaking. On the day we met, she wore a purple tunic with a long necklace of crystals and a tassel. The clinic is decorated with Thai teak furniture, cozy couches, and nature images on saffron-colored walls. Hall looked like someone who would run a meditation retreat. The whole place felt like a spa rather than a doctor's office. There's a shop in the center of the clinic that sells, among other herbal remedies, Hall's own line called Body Software. The pink bottle is Secret of Feminine Radiance. The green one is Prostate Protect. There's also Mega Adrenal and Super Adrenal, which are said to boost motivation. Hall's been on television on both Dr. Phil and Oprah, where she was interviewed by Dr. Mehmet Oz before he had his own syndicated medical program. She counts Suzanne Summers, the actress and diet book author, and Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York and former Weight Watchers ambassador, among her clients. Do you feel it? I'm feeling a little more intense, said Dr. Hall as we waited for the oxytocin to kick in. Then she leaned closer to me and added, I want to look into your eyes. Her publicist said she felt it too, and she leaned towards me. I didn't feel anything. Oxytocin, not to be confused with oxycodone, the narcotic, is a brain hormone. During labor, oxytocin prompts the womb to contract, pushing the baby through the birth canal. Afterward, it triggers the breast ducts to squeeze out milk. The synthetic form of oxytocin, Pitocin, kickstarts labor, providing an extra oomph to get the womb pumping. But recent research has rebranded this heady substance into something more marketable than its prior matronly connotations. Oxytocin has been said to foster bonds between mothers and newborns and between lovers, to bring on erections and orgasm and ejaculation, and enhance mind reading. It's unclear whether or not that all happens at the same time or in what particular order. Oxytocin has also been linked to trust and empathy. One study showed it boosted compassion between Israelis and Palestinians. But here's the rub. Among the flood of studies, upwards of 3,500 oxytocin behavior studies in the past decade, oxytocin has been tied to trust but also distrust, to love but also to envy, to empathy but also to racism. That ought to flummox a potential oxytocin customer. And I go on in that chapter to talk about the history, because it's a fascinating history of oxytocin. And all these things come from a seed of truth. So we do know from great research that if you block in the brain the oxytocin receptors of a goat that's about to give birth, it will headbutt and kick its like little kid, its baby offspring, because it thinks it's a foreigner, and that's how mother goats, I guess, treat babies that they don't know. From that seed, we do think it has something to do with social skills. It has been tried by real scientists to maybe help kids on the autistic spectrum. So far, it hasn't been shown to work that well, but there is fascinating research going on to look at how does it affect behavior. But we don't know yet. It's not ready to be sold in bottles. Also, the stuff that's being sold, you have no idea if it's just a water spray or anything, and you don't know if you're sniffing it how much actually taps into the brain area. Like the studies that are done in the labs actually, inject it right into that brain area of mice. And the other catch on this is to think like, okay, we know if you block oxytocin receptors, the mother goat or mother rat isn't going to bond with her newborns. And we know if you take like a virgin rat and you give it oxytocin, it will start cuddling a newborn baby that you put it with. But we humans are a little more complex, I like to think. I mean, look at how we are with adopted babies. We're not like, okay, we didn't get that oxytocin surge during birth. We tend to actually have behaviors outside of this oxytocin thing. That's oxytocin milk production. That's I'm showing, the complex chemistry. This is love. And that's my baby. She's now 18. She's not happy that I'm showing this slide. She nursed for way too long. But yeah, that's, I thought, our eyes. I look more like, oh my God, how much longer is this gonna go on? But that actually is real love, not that. But the point of all this is that there's seeds of really incredible scientific research that is blossoming, and I think we are going to learn more about oxytocin behavior into this nice tree. But there's also people picking doctors at the low-lying fruit along the way, and how can we market this even before there's studies? I felt a little bad, sort of, just a teeny-weeny little bit bad, poking fun of Dr. Prudence in my book. But just a few weeks ago, after the book was out, she made it into People magazine because guess what? She missed a uterine cancer by just selling people her supplements. She missed another cancer, I think. She's being sued. Now, not only is she being sued, but rightly so, the medical establishment is now finally looking into these hormone clinics. On the positive side, if you are a physician, it's a much easier way to make money. You don't really examine people. You work 9 to 5, or you work whatever hours you want. You charge a fortune. But now she's no longer right now, her OBGYN license is pending. She might have her license removed. And here's a big shocker. She's no longer allowed to call herself an endocrinologist because, news alert, if you haven't actually spent time going through an endocrinology fellowship and passing your boards, you're not allowed to call yourself an endocrinologist. Who knew? There actually is, I don't know if any of you have heard of, there's an American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. Have any of you guys heard of that? I write about that in my book too, in my testosterone chapter. But these are the guys that really promote this stuff. The American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine has thousands and thousands of people that are members. They're MDs. I went to their hormone meeting and I thought it would be funny, and I spent the whole time texting my husband going, "You're not gonna believe the bullshit they're spewing, and this is so annoying." And finally my husband was like, "Stop texting me, like just leave. If you're that angry, just leave, stop texting." But what they do is the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, and it has such a nice standing. It's not recognized by anything in the medical establishment. They were gonna let me do this for free because they knew I was writing about them until they realized what I was writing, then they kicked me out of the meeting. But they offered that I could take their 24-hour online course for free rather than the $1,000. And then after I did this 24-hour course, I could sit for their test, and then I could call myself an endocrinologist. Look at that, in only 24 hours. So I went to the meeting, and I paid to go to the meeting. I didn't take anything for free from them. And they were offering for $3,000 you had to have bought their books, you had to have taken their online course, and then you can go in for $3,000 and sit for their endocrine exam. And it's all about selling supplements. And so I stalked some guy going in to take the exam, and I'm like, can I just ask you something? Like, why are you paying $3,000 to take a test that isn't even recognized by the American Board of, the American Board of Medicine? And he said, because, you get a diploma you can hang on your wall, your patients don't know the difference. Right, so then I wasn't laughing. Then I was like, oh my God. And and this is like, we need to start clamping down and cutting down, because you can understand, what do these guys do that physicians, some of you here are physicians, don't do? They provide 100% surety. Like, they don't say that your doctors say, well, here's the best I can offer you. Honestly, it works for 80% of my patients, but there's gonna have some side effects. No, these guys say, here's the diet you should be on, I'm sure you're gonna feel better, here's the supplements you should take, and their supplements don't have any warning labels because they're not FDA approved. They don't have to have warning labels. So that's my spiel on Dr. Hall and others of her ilk, and there's a lot of others of her ilk. I loved this cartoon. I want to talk a little bit about menopause, and we can open up some stuff for discussion after. If you don't see it, it says, I'll have the cafe mocha vodka Xanax latte to go, please. So menopause. I just recently wrote a piece about menopausal dry vaginas. The New York Times called it the menopausal vagina monologues. So I'm not going to go deep into, I don't want anything to sound weird, but we can ask me any question after. My son, my 22-year-old son, who has an emotional maturity of about an 11-year-old, was like, is this a joke? You're actually gonna write about vaginas in the New York Times? And I was like, yes, Jane. I actually showed him like the first paragraph of my story. I slipped his name into it. I was only joking. I was like, and I actually slipped his name and cell number. Like when I got the playback, I took the playback from the New York Times so it looked really official, and then I just added, Joey Epstein, and gave his cell number, who enjoys his mother writing about these topics. So no, he wasn't in the article though, and he's gotten over it. And his friends, I don't think, read it. Like, they're not reading the well vagina section. So why are we all confused? Well, some of us are confused about what's going on in menopause. So it's like, is it good for you? Is it bad for you? So I go in, I start my chapter actually with a woman who sounds super wacky, and she's a good friend of mine. She was a professor of mine in medical school, and we've stayed in touch. And it's funny because she's like the wacky anecdote in my first book, and then she's the wacky anecdote in here too. She's brilliant. She's an MD, PhD. I think her PhD's in biophysics. She ran one of the menopause, whatever we call it, medical societies. That was in the 1990s. She knows what she's talking about. But here's what she did. In 1990, when she was starting to go through menopause, she knew she wanted to be on estrogen. She thought it would help her with hot flashes and symptoms. She knew this stuff well. She also knew she did not want to be on progesterone because she was worried it would make her crazy, because a lot of women do get moody from progesterone. It has some side effects. So because she's a doctor and had some connections, she went to see she was at Yale at the time. She went to Boston to see a former mentor and said to him, I want an elective hysterectomy, because that way I can be on estrogen alone. We don't recommend that people do this. But as she said, people thought she was crazy, and I actually interviewed and talked. I know a lot of her friends were like, oh my God, Florence was nuts when she did that. We remember she was so tired on the wards, she came back, was crazy. What's not in the book is, but she didn't care if it was in the book. They just edited it out because I think people thought it was way too wacky. She got a facelift at the same time that she had a hysterectomy, which you don't even have to be a doctor to know. You don't want to be bleeding from here and here at the same time. And then she went back to work shortly thereafter and was keeling over. But her thing is people will say I make these anti-feminist decisions, but she's like, I consider myself a feminist. Being a feminist is knowing the information and making the choices that you want to make. No one can be more informed, and she did what she wanted. The one thing that is not in the book, which is funny because I think more like a doctor, I don't think like a lawyer. In the book, she had a quote that said, after she had the surgery, I said to the surgeon, just write, because you can't really write elective hysterectomy. So she said to her doctor, I just said to him, just write submucous fibroids, some fibroids that weren't cancerous. Just write something like that in my chart so there's something. So he said, fine. A lawyer who vetted my book read that sentence. I know, I didn't see it. She's like, you realize that your readers are going to see this and say oh, wait, so doctors lie in medical charts? And I was like, well, I didn't mean it that way. She's like, no, you're going to lose readers. They're going to be distracted from reading about menopause. They're just going to be thinking, oh, that's what doctors do. They just listen to the patient. So that got deleted, that sentence. But that is what happened. But so why this whole thing with estrogen's wonderful? So basically, a lot of the things, I just want to go over a little of the nuts and bolts. There was a big study that we hear of WHI, new findings, no findings, WHI. What was this all about? So in the 1990s, the thinking was, not only is hormone replacement therapy good for menopause, it's going to make us live forever. It's going to prevent Alzheimer's, it's going to prevent heart disease, it's going to prevent every kind of cancer. And it was really touted. Some of this was coming from the estrogen makers, some of it was just wishful thinking, some of it was if we think something's good, we kind of go with it. So they decided to do a study and recruit thousands of women. And what the question of the WHI was, does hormone replacement therapy prevent all these diseases in older women? So the focus of the study was really women 65 and older who had been on hormone replacement for many years. Then, as you all know, the study then was halted before it was supposed to be, because instead of finding out that these women were completely disease-free, there were higher rates of strokes and heart disease. What infuriates the people that did the study, they sort of blame the press, or who knows how the story got misconstrued, is the study was not looking at women who just started menopause, and it wasn't looking at the effectiveness. It was looking at women who were on these hormones for many years, even after their menopausal symptoms subsided. So what are doctors saying now? First we're saying, and you can look at the sales, we're way up, way down, every kind, a study's saying it's going to prevent heart disease, people would take it. What they're saying now is, if you have hot flashes, and some people don't. The thing is, a lot of women, we think of hot flashes, which a lot of women get during the day. You're giving a talk and all of a sudden you're drenched with sweat and you're like, oh my God. But other women have hot flashes and don't realize they're having it. Hot flashes, for those of us who've had the wonders of having them, it's like there's an internal furnace that was turned up inside you. And it's not just that you're hot, though you do want the window open and a lot of space. It's like this claustrophobic, panicky feeling. So there are women that might say, I don't really have hot flashes, but I'm having panic attacks for the first time in my life, or I'm feeling anxious for the first time in my life. And a lot of that is we're thinking due to the same, actually now we've think it's due to this one area of the brain, this one brain cell, recent research is showing. It all has to do with that your temperature control mechanism's really screwed up. So, I'm so much more claustrophobic than I ever was. We went in San Francisco to visit my son to that Coit Tower, and there I am an ordinary menopausal woman, and the guy that's cramming us all on that elevator, if you've ever been on it, they lock you in this elevator for 60 seconds. It's and if anybody's really claustrophobic, I wouldn't recommend you go in. But I didn't want to walk out because I felt like a jerk because I was with my family. There were 6 of us in there, and I was like, oh yeah, mom's menopausal. Why don't you wait in the gift shop? So I did stay on the elevator, but honestly, I was like this. They said it was a 60-second ride, and I'm like, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. And then we got to the top. I counted 60 seconds. The elevator woman was like, before she opened the door, she was like, and I just want to tell you a little bit about what you're going to be seeing. And I was like, I felt like saying, open the door, just please open the door. I cannot breathe. I can't breathe. I'm sweating. And I was like, now we're at 65 seconds, please. It feels like forever. So that can be a feeling related to our menopausal symptoms. Well, what does that have to do with? What we do know now is that for many women, estrogen and progesterone, it's given in lower levels. The progesterone is made differently. It's more bioidentical, matches the progesterone in your body. For many women, it relieves the symptoms of hot flashes and vaginal dryness. And for many women, they're saying now it's safe. What we're saying now might change, but it is safe to go on for many women who don't have a history of breast cancer, who don't have heart disease, and all these things you should be under the care of a physician. They're no longer saying get off it after a year. They don't really give deadlines. The latest guidelines from ACOG are no, you can stay on it longer, but they don't really say how long. What we don't know, and I just told someone last night, I'm going to do an experiment of N equals 1. My gynecologist will kill me for this, but I thought, we don't know if you wean yourself off and when. Does that mean, because I'm on them now, or my hot flash is going to come back? I don't know. My vagina going to get drier? I don't know. Probably. But so for some women can go off it and they don't get their hot flashes back. Some do. We really don't know about a lot of this stuff. We also know for the vaginal dryness, again, a lot of women will say, oh no, I don't have that, but I don't know, maybe I'm just not in the mood for sex anymore. Maybe it's just more uncomfortable because, I don't know, my husband gets on my nerves or my partner gets on my nerves. But we do, it sounds funny, but I do think that we tend to think it's all in our mind. I'm just gonna be a nicer person. And then, but the one thing we do know is not all women suffer from hot flashes, many do. But the wall of the vagina does thin and does get drier, and that isn't just a phase. There are creams, there's non-hormonal creams that work for some women. There's estrogen creams that it doesn't get in your body, so it's a lower dose. So some women, that even might not be able to take oral estrogen, can take it vaginally, and they don't feel some of the other side effects, and it's not the high levels. So there are other things. The one thing, there's also, have any of you guys heard of this Mona Lisa laser? I hate the name. It does, I'll just put it out there before I shit on it. There are some women it helps, and there are some women that they say it helps. And who would be doing this? Women who've had breast cancer that want to have a better sex life, and they feel that this laser is helping them. It's not FDA approved for the purpose of vaginal dryness. It is out there. Your doctors can buy it for a ton of money, and then they have to charge you a ton of money to do it. Even if you think it works, it only lasts for about a year. It's non-hormonal. Here's the thing that kind of creeps me out about it. The way it works, there's been some small studies. but we need longer studies. The way it works is, I like to think of it, it's slightly inaccurate to say it creates tiny tears, the laser in the vaginal wall, but someone said, it's laser, it doesn't really tear, it creates little microscopic openings. Whenever there's openings in your body treats it like a wound, so blood rushes into the area. When blood rushes in, it will sort of start to repair these openings, and it's almost sort of like a scar tissue, which would be like a little slipperier. So that healing effect from what the laser does is supposed to make it like an easier, like a more smoother wall. Yikes. I'm not exactly sure how much it costs, but when I started researching it, because you know how things are, when you start researching it, you start getting ads for things. So I got an ad that I could save $1,200 on my first laser therapy. So I thought, it must be really expensive if they're gonna let me save $1,200. So that's the deal with that. Some doctors are saying, for women with breast cancer, try it. Your insurance is not gonna cover it because it's not FDA approved. The FDA just came out with a new statement, because I think they're annoyed that it's becoming so popular, saying this is not approved for this use. So that's what's going on with vaginas now.
Can you talk a little bit about Bioidentical?
I was just going, we think alike. We just kind of meshed on that Instagram thing. So people are always asking, like, what about bioidentical hormones? But what you really mean is, what about bioidentical compounded hormones? Because they get mushed together. And so bioidentical just means mimicking your body. And so the hormones I'm on now are bioidentical, which a lot of big pharma drugs are. They're bioidentical, they mimic what's in your body, they come in lots of doses, and therefore it's supposed to be a little healthier. Like the very first WHI study did not use bioidentical progesterone. It used like a progestin that's similar. So that's why some people think they even had more side effects. Nothing wrong. I think it's good to use bioidentical. The compounded stuff is what vexes me a bit. So compounded drugs started this way. I think it was like 1970s or 1980s. We realized that, let's say you had an elderly parent that had to be on a pill, but they can't swallow pills. The doctors could say, let me see if I can get a pharmacist to take that ingredient and make it into a syrup. And then you're not going to take that small little thing of syrup and put it through the FDA. So there was this law that said, okay, you don't have to have compounded hormones, compounded drugs, not just hormones, compounded drugs do not have to go through the FDA. So that way you can get, great grandma her liquid of what she has to take rather than a pill. Or maybe you have a child that has a severe allergy to one of the oils that's used to make a pill. Someone caught on to this, I don't know who, but some thought, wow, there's a market in this. So they started marketing compounded hormones as the sort of earthier, crunchier, better way versus big pharma. The problem is, a lot of compounded hormone companies are just as big as big pharma. You're not going and getting it homemade in someone's kitchen. You're just getting more expensive drugs that don't go through the FDA, and that's the key thing. So this journalist a few years ago, and I really wish I thought of this idea because it's so simple and smart. She, no medical background, but just thought, okay, doctors are bitching about compounded hormones. So she got 12 prescriptions of compounded, I think, estrogen and progesterone, took it to a lab, and none of them had the doses that were in the containers. That's serious, because you could be getting estrogen and no progesterone. That's really dangerous if you think you're getting the progesterone to protect against uterine cancer and you're not getting it. So there are doctors now really fighting against it to say that these compounded hormones should have to go through the FDA. The other thing that gets misconstrued is, if your drug doesn't go through the FDA, you don't have to have a warning label in it. So just like the supplements, when you get compounded hormones, they don't have, it gives the appearance of no side effects. because you don't have to have a warning label in it. So you think you're getting something healthier than your OBGYN might have given you. Your OBGYN is going to give you something from Big Pharma, and it's going to have all the pros and cons, and maybe it has this side effect, and it's going to get you all worried. But if you can go to like someone like Prudence Hall, who's going to say, no, just take my estrogen, progesterone, it looks 100% healthy because it doesn't have to have a warning label in it. So that's where we are now with it. And so I think that we do need to tighten these rules, and I think that you have to know, you really should know what you're getting in these bottles. And the other thing that people don't realize, not that I'm this like pushing Big Pharma, but you can, sometimes it's sold as, but I'm gonna get you the amount that you need in the compounded. I mean, the pharmaceutical companies aren't stupid. They know what to do too. They have like every dose you can imagine, so you can go lower, higher, whatever, under your doctor's recommendation. I wanna give you a 3-minute little story, and then we'll open up to about Rosalind Yallow. Does anyone know that name? She should be known, Rosalind Yallow. Okay, here's a name that should be known. So I interviewed her kids. She died about 10 years ago, and I talked to a lot of doctors that worked with her, and even her kids would say, oh, she was a really tough woman, and she only would really like talk to you or befriend you if you were as smart as she was, and that she was brilliant, so that was like a very tiny group of people. But when you learn about her life, you think she deserved to be an angry woman. So here's her story. She was the one that when I said I was going to tell you about the woman that created the way to measure hormones down to a billionth of a gram, she did it along with her partner Salman Burson. Only she got the Nobel because he had already died. So here's her story. Rosalind Yallow was a poor girl from the Bronx in New York City, went to Hunter College, public college, graduated one of the tops in her class in physics, said to her advisor, I love science, this is what I want to do. And her advisor said, Rosalind, this is the 1940s, or maybe she shouldn't say that, but she did say this, you know, you are a woman, why don't you become a secretary to a scientist? So she did, because she had no other choice. But she figured she'd be a secretary to a university scientist, because then you could take free classes, and then she would take free science classes, because she wasn't thinking one day I'm going to revolutionize 20th century medicine. She just wanted to learn. So she gets a job for working for a Columbia University scientist, and she says that she wants to take science classes on her free time. And he said, how about stenography? That makes more sense for you. Which I don't know if she took the stenography classes, but she wasn't taking science classes. Finally, her kids have said to me, like, my mom had no sense of humor, but she must have had some sense of humor, because she told her biographer they had to have a world war in order for me to go to graduate school. And she's right. There were a few openings. One was at Purdue. Purdue called Hunter and said, look, we have an opening for a spot. We don't want to waste it. She's Jewish, she's a woman. Can you guarantee that you'll give her a job after she gets her PhD? And Hunter said, well, we can't guarantee. So Purdue rescinded that offer. And then University of Illinois let her come. She got her PhD a year sooner than her husband. She met her husband out there. He was from New York. He got a job right away the following year. She was scrambling for anyone to hire her. She got a PhD in physics. She finally got a job at Bronx VA, and it was there. I'm not going to get into all the science today. It's in the book, I think told in a really fun way. That's where she developed this technique of radioimmunoassay. And just to say one thing, her initial study that led to this seriously revolutionizing technique, and I hate the word revolutionize because we just overuse it, but we're not overusing it for this. That same technique to measure hormones down to the billionth of a gram is the same technique that we use like to spot the HIV virus and AIDS. It's the same technique that you couldn't have the fertility centers tracking your hormones. It's the same technique for measuring cancer markers. Anything that before was immeasurable is now measurable because of this technique. Her initial study that she did with Salman Burson to show some of the groundwork for this was rejected across the board from all the scientific journals, because even though the data was right, I mean, they're humans that edit science journals, they just couldn't believe it. That initial data showed that hormones can elicit an immune response, you know, that your body reacts against it, but people didn't think it was possible. And she finally got it published. In one of her last talks, which was to a third grade class in New York City, and she did speak around the world, she said to them, And when you get your rejection letters, after you've done a good study and you've saved all the data, save those rejection letters, because one day you can use them in your Nobel Prize talk, which she did. So there's a little lore about her. People have said, oh, after she won the Nobel, she always had to sign her name Rosalind Yallow, Nobel laureate, as if like, who cares? Like when I win I'm gonna sign that. Like if you win the Nobel, like think of what we put under our email things, like our little piddly titles. But her kids were like, oh, that's not really true. And then they also say that, oh, she always had to wear her Nobel chain, which it is on in the one picture I have of her, but whether she did or not, who cares? But her kids said this is true. Behind her desk, she always had this sign: to be considered half as good as a man, a woman must work twice as hard and be twice as good. And we could be like, oh, right, we've all heard that. But Rosalind Yallow, the woman who supposedly did not have a sense of humor, had this added to it. Fortunately, that's not difficult. So I thought I'd end there, and we can open it up to questions. Does that? Or conversation, or chat, or whatever.
I had an interesting coincidence happen to me, and maybe you've heard of it more. Over the summer, I started to experience a lot of hot flashes, and I mean like a dozen plus a day, like hourly, awake or at sleep. And I'm somebody who's had caffeine on and off in my life, and I was on a caffeine phase, and I just recently went off caffeine like in the last month, and 0 hot flashes.
Yeah, a lot of people say that, and I think it's more, it is anecdotal, and I've seen it written, and maybe we can have our OBGYN talk about that here, but I think that it does. They do say some women, alcohol affects their hot flashes. A lot of caffeine, I've heard a lot. Me personally, I need my caffeine first thing in the morning, and I hadn't felt, and I tried that going off, and for me it didn't make a difference at all. But they do, a lot of women, and again, I think because some of this is just my own sort of theory based on what I've read. I think because the hot flashes tend to make you feel that claustrophobic heat, and then it gets your adrenaline rushing, that plus the caffeine, which also has that same panicky feeling, can just clash together and make things that much worse. So it probably helps for, I think it does for some women going off the caffeine. But I know other women that have gone off and they're still getting hot flashes. It's so personal for it, yeah.
I just started skirting the middle by having a light tea. And it seems to be working better.
Yeah, no, but it helps some women, and I know like there's some women, if without, like, the vaginal dryness doesn't just naturally go away, the hot flashes for 80% of women will fade after a few years, but for 2% of women, they never go away. Yeah, and I've spoken to some of those women that are like well into their late 60s. So everyone's so different, but I think there's a reason for that caffeine link, getting that adrenaline and the sort of hot flash too.
Yeah, I have a question. So I'm a family doctor, and I'm kind of curious if they've kind of figured out a little bit why different people respond to the same hormones so differently. So having written prescriptions for hormones, women report back wildly different experiences to similar things, and so I have to imagine that different people's chemistry.
Yeah, so the complete answer is no, we don't know why. But here's some of the hints. Like, I always thought, like, up until 2 weeks ago, I would have said it has to do with your hormone receptors. Some people we think, your hormones tap into your receptors, and some people might have more receptors, some people might have more sensitive receptors. And I mean, that's still part of the story. But I just met the most amazing woman who does research at Yale, and her research it started with leptin and like hunger and obesity, but her area of research, which she just got a grant for, and I find it fascinating, is she thinks a lot of the difference between how women, not just how women respond to hormones, but also hunger signals and other hormonal signals in your body, has to do with differences within your cell. I mean, she's a basic scientist, and now she's looking into sort of the mitochondria and the energy within the cell, because she's saying, I know we all think cell receptors, but your cell makes its own receptors. So something within the cell, I mean, this is going really deep, nitty gritty, but that's what she's looking at. I mean, and hopefully these kind of studies then will make to more targeted therapy so that you could say, but I think we're so in the beginning. But I just thought that was fascinating because she thinks like there's just different energy levels within the cell that affects how your hormones are made, how your receptors are made.
I find it interesting what you said about the sort of almost panic attack feeling of a hot flash, because I've had a couple of those and I researched it because I'm like, this has got to be, it felt like a mild panic attack or adrenal, but just like I'm sitting doing something and all of a sudden this sort of acute wave of anxiety and my heart's racing. I don't feel hot. Anyway, but the interesting thing is that I researched it and I couldn't find anything that was a hot flash, even though I was convinced it was.
Yeah, no,
it's not out there that it is.
It's not really out there, but in some of the research, like when I talked to a neuropathologist who's looking into the mechanisms of why we lose this temperature control mechanism. And so, yeah, some of the researchers are saying it right, but you don't see it on like the typical menopause things. But it happened to me. That's what made me look into like, I had that same.
And is there, I know with the larger hormone replacement study that there was some issue of like the timing of it and the whether it was protective or destructive had to do with whether you started taking the hormones post-menopause, pre-menopause.
Well, now they're saying it's still out there in the sense of that you really should be taking, I mean, that goes back to that you really should be taking it for hot flashes or vaginal dryness, not for preventing heart disease or not for preventing Alzheimer's. So that's why they're saying take it around the time of menopause or even perimenopause. Most women don't realize they're in perimenopause because it's not like you wake up one morning and all of a sudden you're like, oh, right, because you think of menopause as something that happens to people who are 10 years older than you, no matter how old you are. You think it's for women 10 years, you know? And then all of a sudden you're like only in your 40s and your period's getting a little more irregular and you're feeling bitchy and your kids are going through puberty and they're bitchy and it's this weird combination. And it doesn't even dawn on you to talk to your gynecologist about it because you're just in a bad mood and your period's heavier and you're in your 40s. You don't need to go to a doctor because your period's heavier. So that's when they're thinking, like that's when a lot of the hormone replacement therapy works in this menopausal time the best. But there is other research I haven't read in a while, but I know that there's like, they've done like for cancer therapy, they've looked at timing in terms of morning and night and when to take things and like your circadian rhythm and how your hormones affect what time of day you're taking. But again, I don't think there's any definitive answers on that.
Can you talk about other symptoms that might be relieved by HRT? Like I'm specifically wondering about like a suddenly developing joint pain or
Because of the HRT.
Oh no, because of menopause. Like because you often hear about vaginal dryness and hot flashes, but I feel like the older I get, the more I'm just getting these like weird things like tendinitis, and I'm wondering if like I just started taking hormones, I would feel better. I don't know.
You know, I don't know if that's so much from the lower levels of estrogen, progesterone, or just chronic use. Like those of us who have like exercised for many years, it's just a lot of the arthritis, not arthritis like rheumatoid arthritis, but the inflammation around your joints. Like my knees are more like hinges now. They don't sort of rotate the way they're supposed to. So, and I don't know if that's real. I think that it sort of happens around this age. But I don't know if we can directly say it's a hormonal thing or just wear and tear of our joints.
Take hormones and suddenly be 28 again.
No, but you could find someone who will tell you that.
So, a different part of the cycle. So what about the connection between hormones and birth and postpartum and changes in your kind of hormonal balance that comes after childbirth? And how long is there a typical length of time for that effect?
Yeah, we're still looking into those areas. I mean, they do know that women who have had depression before or are more prone to depression are more sensitive to the changes. I mean, it's a, you know, your hormones are going crazy then. You know, it's not just, you know, your oxytocin shoots up and then your progesterone plummets and you have this massive change. And they do know that for some women who are more susceptible, and again, it goes back to, you know, who's sensitive and how sensitive to hormones we are. How long does it last? It's so individual. I do think, though, this doesn't really answer your question because the answer is like, we don't really know all that. There are pockets of more outreach to help women that might feel that they have postpartum issues. And I just went to this talk. I know it's at Pittsburgh, and they're starting different centers around the country to get women in who feel they might need the extra help. And what they're doing is, it's wonderful. They set up these day centers for women that they even have people that can help play with your baby or help take care of the baby so that you can have a chance to rest and talk about what, you know, you have to know to be able to go to these centers. And they're talking about, I can't remember where else, but there's like 9 of them now in the country where they want OBGYNs to be able to say, look, if you're feeling a little off, or if you're feeling that you're more depressed than you should be, just the typical tiredness, come in. We're going to have people that can help take care of your baby. We're going to talk to you. We're going to see what kind of medications or sleep. And it's also the sleep deprivation for some women. You know, I have 4 kids, so, and it's a huge change. So do we know exactly who's going to be susceptible? No, like it's hard to predict unless someone has had a clinical depression before. We know they're at higher risk, but other women hadn't, and they plummet into the postpartum depression.
We just signed legislation mandating, I think, January 19, maternal care for postpartum depression.
Wow.
Yeah, insurance must cover it.
That's so great. Well, I'll tell you, I wrote an article years ago because I gave birth to my first son in London. And you leave the hospital, and it's a rule in England, whether you're like the fanciest person in the world or the opposite end of fanciest person in the world, someone comes to your house every day to check on you and the baby. And at first I was like, oh, because I thought it was going to be like some really uptight British person in like some starched white thing coming to like tell me about putting my kid on a schedule and doing this and like testing me. And it was like this woman who was from the islands who had this like flowing skirt, and she was so chill. And she would come, and basically you could say, where do I buy diapers? Where do I do this? And they came with like this cutest, they probably do it in more sophisticated now. This goes back 25 years ago. But they came with a little fish scale, like the old fashioned one, and they'd put your baby on it. But I swear I think they help. This system is so wonderful because one is they're weighing your baby to make sure the baby's okay. So it's a subtle check of also child abuse, or not just child abuse, or things that could potentially go wrong with the baby. 2, you feel like you're in a community. Like I knew that no matter what question I had, someone was coming the next day. She seemed to have all the time in the world to answer questions. And then when I got back to the States, 2 things happened. One, that like shortly after I got back to the States and I was pregnant with twins, I remember my mother called and she was like, did you see the article? And I'm like, oh my God, yes. There was a short piece in the New York Times about a young girl who was 19, gave birth, got home, was nursing her baby, and the baby ended up dying because it was starved to death. This girl had no idea that she had no breast milk. And the article was about there was going to be criminal charges against this young girl. And I thought, oh my God, like in England, this would have never happened. It wouldn't have been an issue. Someone would have come on day 2 and said, oh, you know, with their little fish scale, the baby didn't weigh more, maybe you need formula. And when they find that, they bring you then the formula. They also do at 6 weeks, they come back they come for 10 days, and then if you're okay, they stop coming back. But if they think you still need them, they'll keep going. This is all free. At 6 weeks, they knock on your door again, and they said, you know, I just want to talk to you. I'll hold the baby. And she's chatting, but it's actually a checklist of postpartum depression. But she does it in this nice conversational way. So at 6 weeks, they're checking on it, and if they think that you need help, they'll funnel you into the right systems. They come back again when the kid is about 2 years old. My friend's child needed some kind of, 2 or 3 needed speech therapy. And rather than it just being ignored, the person who came to visit at their home funneled him right into the right centers. But even still, so I gave birth then to twins at Mount Sinai, and it was like just terrible help around the time I was there, so I was just like, I've got to get out of here. So like I left, like, you have to sign, I'm leaving against medical advice, but I was just like, no, I need to get home. So I left like shortly after they were born. But it was so weird, so I was like, okay, and so I'm just leaving, and no one's gonna check on me. They're like, well, bring them to the pediatrician, go see your doctor in a couple months. But I was like, and then that's when I wrote the article, because I'm like, this is so weird. Like, when I was in England, I knew I was part of this community, and I just felt like there was help around. And then here I am in New York City. Well, not here I am now, but there I was then in New York City. And I just felt like, that's so weird. So you just send people home with newborns, and then you just deal. So I think, yeah, there's definitely a biological and hormonal basis, but I think we have to deal with making it more of a community for women. Any other questions?
So Randi's book is for sale.
And I'll sign it. It's good for gifts or just to put out there with like some weird libidinous kind of.
Any other questions?
So, one other question. So you've mentioned OBGYNs, primary care physicians, endocrinologists. Are those all specialties that you would say address hormonal?
And urologists. And there are women who go into urology, not a lot, but then specialize in women's care. But yeah, and a lot of family practitioners are getting into that area as well. But yeah, I do think you want to go to someone reproductive. Well, I guess that's reproductive endocrinology. So you want to go to someone that really did.
So with the United States medical training system, the way it is now, that would be the specialty that you would look for if you wanted to ask specific questions about
hormones. Yeah, endocrinology, OBGYN. And then I think that probably family practitioners stay up on hormone replacement therapy and things like that too.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah.
But there are urologists.
You really want the reproductive endocrinologist who focuses on the other end, or no, that's not right. If you wanted like the most
for menopause?
Yeah.
Well, there are OBGYNs that specialize in menopause. And I don't think, it's not like board certification, but it's like they're the ones that are going to all those menopause meetings. Like there's one going on right now, I think in San Diego, of, menopause people. But I think OBGYNs tend to keep up with that, especially as they age and hit menopause. And they
And they don't want to deliver babies anymore.
And then how do we get to follow you? You're on Instagram?
Yeah, I'm newish to Instagram, but I have a website that I blog about, and I'll post my articles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I try to stay up on Instagram, and then sometimes my kids are like, oh, it's so embarrassing. But because I have a habit of like going into places and like saying, can you please hold my book? And then like in my liquor store, I'm like, hey, Raul's getting aroused. Hold on, I did that. And then I took a little video. It's where I get my menopausal cures. It's where I get my Hendrix. I was like, can I videotape you? So I videotaped him. So I'm like, come on, Rolls, look aroused. And he's like, I don't know if I can look aroused now. I'm like, no, you can. You can look aroused. That's not arousing enough. And I put that on Instagram. My kids are like, I think it was like #mom. This is not like, this is weird. Now you're getting weird.
Actually, I think that's your cue that you're doing it right.
Yeah.
It's like, my adult kids, it's when they start to get cringy, then I'm like, yeah, I got it.
Right. And it's like, you're using the same joke over and over. You're just walking into random stores and saying, can you please hold my book? And then can I say, you got aroused? Yeah, it's the same joke. Oh, I know. Don't even start. And my book came out. My book came out in August in England, and someone already said, I know. It's like, get aroused with Randi. Yeah, I know.
Does it be the same here?
No, not at all. Nope.
Yeah. But my question was about human growth hormone. Isn't that meaning nowadays to make you keep younger for longer? Have you heard about this?
Yeah, well, now we use synthetic growth hormone. Like I write about when we don't get it from pituitaries, we make it in a lab. But yeah, there's all this crazy stuff, like about at using it as a diet remedy, it's just nuts. Like I'm not into like injecting stuff in you and you don't have a deficit. I said that last night, and then someone asked me a question about the birth control pill. I'm like, okay, except for that. But yeah, I just think fiddling with like growth hormone when you really don't need it is playing with fire. We just don't know what it's going to do. And we don't have a remedy for aging it. We really don't. We haven't, figured out how to reverse the clock. So should we just
only because you mentioned Suzanne Summers, didn't she need some testosterone?
Who?
Suzanne Summers, only because you were talking
Oh,
about
yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
Isn't she like mixed?
Oh, yeah, everything. She pumps up with everything and testosterone and it is being pushed on women to boost your libido. I don't think the studies, apparently for some women it might help a little. The studies really aren't out there. There are some women that might have very low testosterone levels. The problem is as you know, libido is such a mix of, some of it is hormonal, but some of it's also emotional. This wonderful expert who's at University of Chicago who I spoke to for my vagina piece, said, even though she's an OBGYN who really knows her hormones, but sometimes it's hormones, sometimes it's a relationship issue. And she said, I have a lot of patients who don't want to admit that it's just their long marriage or what's going on in their relationship. I had an OBGYN tell me this story. Probably, we're not going to name names. I don't even know the name of the person. But she told me the story of a woman who's had vaginal dryness and problems with sexual intercourse recently and other things, and they've tried everything, nothing's working. And my friend who's the OBGYN said, do you have any relationship issues? No, I've been married forever, blah, blah, blah. And then she came in recently and said, I'm cured. Like, I feel better. She's like, well, tell me, because then I'm going to tell all my other patients. And she said, actually, I'm having an affair. So I wouldn't recommend that. I've been happily married, and I also drown in Jewish guilt, so I just can't imagine, like, what would happen if I had an affair. I just feel so guilty, like, whatever. So I don't recommend that as a cure. But her point was that sometimes it's not, women tend to think, and what is it about me? Sometimes it's your partner. If you have a male partner, sometimes he might be having some issues with having erections, and that can affect your sex life. She uses this expression, what does she say? It's hard to get a marshmallow into a piggy bank. Yeah, picture that. But she said she has patients who it's the guy's problem. It's not theirs. But women tend to think, like, what's my issue? So let's end on, like, that slide of Rosalind Yallow. Let's go back to that one. Thank you so much.